Hey everybody, it's Thorn. I know it's been a little while, like 3 months since I've made a video. I have been completely focused on school and work and life stuff. Things have been really good. A lot has happened, and I mostly just wanted to make a video and check in with everybody and let you know what's going on in my world. The biggest thing is definitely that I just finished my first year of a religious studies PhD. And, people have a lot of horror stories about grad school, and I think those stories are fair. I've been to grad school twice before. I have master's degrees, like completely separate master's degrees in English and also in religious studies. My religious studies MA is like 10 years old at this point, and then my literature MA, I don't even know when I graduated, like 2019, something like that, relatively fresh. I did it while I was teaching, and it had been a dream for a long time to go back and do a PhD, but that is a life-altering kind of banana pants endeavor, even in the best of circumstances, and things really didn't pan out in my 20s, mostly due to like mental health stuff, honestly. And the market, I think, was particularly bad at that point. It's never really marketable to get a PhD, especially in the humanities. But here we are, approaching my 40s. I sort of just like no longer cared how much sense it made to other people. And the pandemic created kind of a unique set of circumstances that made it possible, so I just went for it. But I couldn't quit my job, so I am working full-time at the same time that I am doing a PhD full-time, and yes, that is a problem. There's lots of horror stories that people will share about graduate school, and I get it, but I have this working theory. I suspect that many of the problems that people face in grad school are less about grad school itself and more about, I think, the age at which most people do graduate school. Almost all of my peers are in their 20s. Most of the people who I know who got their PhDs in my discipline did so in their 20s. And that was the worst time of my whole life. I think your 20s are the worst time in a lot of people's lives, kind of even if you have like a good life, just because your brain isn't done growing, right? Like your body is your body changes. And anyway, no, but like it's just such a tumultuous time in somebody's life. You're dealing with all kinds of other stuff, right? Like most 20-year-olds are really concerned with like dating and figuring out where they're going to live and thinking about what their future is going to look like and like, who am I in life? And dealing with like adulthood and separation from their parents. Like even in the best of circumstances, being in your 20s is really, really hard. It's when a lot of mental illnesses make their appearance for the first time, which is so much fun. I can tell you from personal experience. And all of those things. Oh, also, nobody in their 20s has like boundaries. Like, I'm sorry, but we just don't learn those unless we're actively working at it in our 20s. But most of us don't get those until much later in our life. I certainly didn't have any in my 20s. And all of those things make grad school a lot harder than I think it has to be. And honestly, like this has been my best graduate school experience so far. And it is because I am older. Like that is why. At this point, going into my PhD program, I have had well over a decade of therapy. All of my brain goblins have been regulated either with said therapy or with meds or whatever. I am securely familyed. Okay, so like I'm not dating, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. Like I know, I know that the career ladder is a lie, so I no longer am overly concerned with like putting all of my personal like sense of self-worth into a job. Like there's just so many things in my life that are resolved. I've had the opportunity to work, like I'm financially secure, like all that to say, grad school can be really horrible. For me, it is not. For me, it has been amazing. It's been such an opportunity, and this is probably the happiest I've been in my whole life. It's still really hard, but mostly that's a time management issue and like a brain capacity issue. I definitely get home like at night and just feel like if I think another thought, my brain will melt out of my tear ducts and that will just be the end of me. But I'm happy things are going really well. I am navigating coursework. I've got one more year of coursework, and then it's about a 5-year program. It's going to take me 5 years. And you have 2 years of coursework, and then there's comprehensive exams, and you're writing a dissertation, and this whole time you're either TAing or you're working as a teaching fellow and you're actually teaching your own classes. I mean, I'm at an advantage there too because I'm a classroom teacher. I have a formal background in education. I've had my own classrooms, and even before I was a classroom teacher, I was working as an adjunct lecturer at a university. So like, I've designed classes and taught them before to undergraduates. That's something I've been paid for, and I'm just going in with a lot of tools that I didn't have in my 20s. And it means that I have more capacity freed up to work a day job, right? Especially a day job that I've had for several years that I'm also confident in. So like, I'm in a really, really good position. What is the end goal, you ask? Well, I don't super know. I mean, the way I figure it, and did I say this during my interviews? Yes, I did. The way I figure it, life was already really hard. I think millennials in particular have just had a really rough shake of things, and by the time the pandemic rolled around, I think we were all just really sick of living in unprecedented times, right? And I figured that if I already was never going to be able to retire and home ownership might be a mass delusion, then I may as well do the stuff I wanted to do. And religious studies is something I'm passionate about. This was kind of a dream. And I figured if life is going to be really hard anyway, and we've already figured out that saving money is a lie. I don't mean this to sound negative. I feel like a lot of us are there, right? But life is real short, an opportunity arose, and I'm not doing this because I think it's going to net me a job that gives me money to retire or be wealthy or something. I already know that isn't going to happen. That isn't going to happen no matter what industry I'm in. So I may as well be in the industry that I want to be in. So in my in my general sort of fantasizing, I think that having a formal background in religious studies, especially at the PhD level, will give my writing overall a depth and an authority that it wouldn't have otherwise. I think that there's kind of an assumption in not just witchcraft and pagan spaces, but I think in new religious movement spaces as a whole, that people who practice magic, people who practice witchcraft, people who practice or who are people who are polytheists, right? People who do stuff that mainstream groups think is weird. There's this assumption that I think we're all just kind of cracked or we're stupid or something. And that's not true. That's not true. I know that's not true. And having those kinds of credentials, I think, gives me the opportunity to speak in spaces that normally we would be excluded from. So that's really exciting. I don't explicitly research witchcraft per se. I have a lot of hesitancy around studying my own stuff. I think that there's a lot of, I think, ethical and methodological issues around looking really closely at your own thing. It doesn't seem to bother the students who do biblical stuff. The Christian kids come in and study the Bible and nobody is surprised and nobody has a conversation with them about well, can you be objective? Can you be critical? But that's something that a lot of the rest of us face when we come in and we want to look at our own traditions, our non-Christian traditions. So like there's that. But a lot of it too, frankly, is just not wanting to shit where I eat, if that makes sense. I feel like witchcraft communities in particular are just, they're really easy to target, I guess, in a way by like journalists and academics. And I feel like there's been a lot of stuff that's produced about those communities that isn't very helpful and isn't very accurate. And it's very difficult to produce good stuff, I think, using a lot of the methods that we rely on. And I don't want to be in the position of writing and publishing stuff about literal people that I know and communities that I'm invested in, only to have them maybe do more harm than good in the long run. So that's something that I'm conscious of. So I study a little bit further afield. Anyway, what else? I wrote another book. Well, I helped write another book. This is just the galley copy. The actual release is happening this summer. I think it's happening in June. I'm bad at marketing. June. Sure, let's go with that. This is Llewellyn's Sun Sign series. It's the primary author is Ivo Dominguez Jr., who you might know. He's totally brilliant. And then what he's done is he's partnered with a witch who has the sun sign in question, and with them, we have written a book about that sun sign and being a practitioner and kind of thinking about astrology and how your sun sign might impact your practice. So I wrote Taurus Witch with Evo, and I'm excited about it because I think the internet pretty much knows that I'm not like an astrology girly, okay? I use astrology as a magical tool. I think of it like it's a hammer in the toolbox, and when you need a hammer, there it is. That's awesome. But astrology is not something that I spend a ton of time thinking about, just generally speaking, out in the world. I'm not one to blame, my poor communication skills on Mercury retrograde, etc. Okay. But I think that there's a lot of stuff in that system that's really valuable. And kind of the argument that folks make is that it's not a question of whether or not you believe in astrology. There's still kind of these influences in your life. And if you can harness them and do something useful with them, then why not do that? It was a lot of fun because Evo is, he's just such a high caliber and interesting and experienced magician. And so he has a lot to say. Like all of the woo stuff is here, which is great. It's really cool. And then my contributions in the spirit of Taurus are kind of ruthlessly pragmatic. I don't think I wrote a single ritual or spell, right? It's all like I wrote about fat phobia, and I wrote about why we think laziness is a thing, and I wrote about capitalism, right? And I wrote about like bodies, and I wrote about money and budgeting and kind of the practical stuff that I think we don't think of as being tied to witchcraft, but it definitely is. So this was a lot of fun. It was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I learned a whole lot. I think you all will learn a whole lot. There's going to be a book for each sun sign. These are something to check out. They're super cute. They're really little. So a quick read, and I think that they're appropriate for beginners to astrology for sure. They're definitely appropriate for witches who maybe have never really thought about astrology and want to dip a toe in and see if it's something that is useful to them. So that's definitely the market. Or if you're already really into astrology, but you don't know a lot about witchcraft, this could be a good entry point too. So something to check out. Finally, my last piece of big news is that I have broken the seal on another book. I am working on my third, well, I guess this is maybe technically my third, but it's co-written. This is going to be my third sole author work with Llewellyn. I'm really excited about it. It is off and running. The manuscript is due in October, so I have to really like haul ass over here. But I'm really excited about it. It is, I'll tell you a little bit more once we're closer to it being done. Not so much because it's a secret, but because I really just like to have the space in my head to focus on what I'm writing without potentially being influenced like unintentionally by people that I'm talking to, especially online. So I'll tell you a little bit more when it's closer to being finished. But it's definitely a hole in, I think, witchcraft literature. It's a hole that has been previously filled, but not very well. So and nobody's tried in a while. So I am going to be combining my academic background and also my practitioner background to write something that does a very specific job, and I'm very excited about it. That's what's going on in my life. I hope you all are doing well. I'm still active over on Patreon. That's where I'm posting any blog that I do ends up on Patreon. I'm really not blogging publicly anymore. And I think my primary social media / internet friend space hub is the Discord server that's attached to my Patreon. So that's where I live most of the time. If that's interesting to you, there's always a link down below. It's $1, right? Like, I try not to make it a big deal. And anyway, I guess that's all. I hope everybody's summer is off to a good start. I hope you all are well. Or winter, I suppose, my Southern Hemisphere friends. I hope you all are well, and I hope that it is not 3 months before I post another video.